years old. The driver of the truck has been charged with wheel separation.
But that's a real truck.
Scarborough, Carl Hansky, 680 News. 680 News Time, 7:04. Mayor Tory says an investigation is underway after a bylaw officer confronted two black women in a West End park in an alleged incident of racial profiling. 680's Jamie Pulver joins us live with the story. Jamie.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. The mayor calls this extremely disturbing, warranting a full investigation, tweeting that he will not tolerate any city employees engaging in behavior that threatens residents or demonstrates anti-black racism. This after an incident involving a white bylaw officer and two black women at Centennial Park in Etobicoke. The women accusing the officer of racially profiling them after he accused them of trespassing.
You want to deny it?
Nope.
After all of us are here, and we heard and we saw, he said that if we trespass, he is licensed to shoot us. That is exactly what he said.
The incident captured on cell phone video posted at 680news.com. The officer denies making that comment. Now, the women say that they were in the park for a workout. The gate was open. There were other people on the field. But when they went to leave,
They don't sound like they were jumping no
and they were the
fences.
only ones asked for
Sound a little bigger
identification
than the
because
fence.
two white teenagers were leaving at the same time. This as more anti-racism protests today. Not another black life will gather outside Toronto Police Headquarters. Reporting live, Jamie Pulver, 680 News.
680 News Time 7:05. In the U.S., Donald Trump has signed an executive order to encourage reforms in policing amid mounting pressure to stop police brutality and
Still on a
violence
2-minute
against
delay.
Black Americans. But as we hear from 680's Karen Seolan, critics say the American president's
Sounds
order
like shit. What the fuck is wrong? I didn't get the whole building moved under a fucking.
Says Trump's order falls short of what activists have been calling for.
It does not meet this moment.
The president signaling he'll consider legislation that calls for more changes in policing policies.
I am committed to working with Congress.
Both Republican and Democratic lawmakers are working on their own opposing police reform bills. Senate Republicans hoping to unveil their bill on Wednesday.
When every black man in America believes that getting stopped by the cops is a traumatic experience, something happens somehow.
It's a fear Democratic Senator Cory Booker knows.
I worry in this moment. I really do that we're going to repeat history, that this is the movie Groundhog Day.
Democrats are demanding an end to chokeholds and creating an abusive officer registry.
There are thousands of people marching in the streets in 50 states demanding meaningful change.
I'm Karen Seolan.
680 News Time, 7:07. 5 years ago today, a young white nationalist opened fire on a room full of worshipers at an African-American church in South
Please just play
Carolina,
the
killing
video
9 people. As ABC's Jim Ryan reports, the healing continues.
During his interrogation by police, 21-year-old Dylan Roof was as emotionless as he was when he pulled the trigger.
I had to do it because somebody had to do it.
5 years later, the Reverend Eric Manning of Mother Emanuel AME says he hopes the takeaway for the rest of the world is the same, that somebody has to do something. It's
What?
Jim Ryan, ABC News.
The fuck is all that?
This is 680 News.
Weirdest goddamn weird. I thought I'd have weird commercials in the 80s
Calls
and
for more
90s.
changes in policing policies.
I am committed to working with Congress.
Both Republican and Democratic lawmakers are working on their own opposing police reform bills. Senate Republicans hoping to unveil their bill on Wednesday.
When every black man in America believes that getting stopped by the cops is a traumatic experience, something happens somehow.
It's a fear Democratic Senator Cory Booker knows.
I worry in this moment. I really do that we're going to repeat history, that this is the movie Groundhog Day.
Democrats are demanding an end to chokeholds and creating an abusive officer registry.
There are thousands of people marching in the streets in 50 states demanding meaningful change.
I'm Karen Seolan.
680 News Time, 7:07. 5 years ago today, a young white nationalist opened fire on a room full of worshipers at an African-American church in South Carolina, killing 9 people. As ABC's Jim Ryan reports, the healing continues.
During his interrogation by police, 21-year-old Dylan Roof was as emotionless as he was when he pulled the trigger.
I had to do it because somebody had to do something.
5 years later, the Reverend Eric Manning of Mother Emanuel AME says he hopes the takeaway for the rest of the world is the same, that somebody has to do something.
With hope that it inspires someone who was either the extreme left or extreme right to say, this price is far too high.
Jim Ryan, ABC News.
Second from left.
This is 680 News. The federal government facing two key votes today. 680's Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney is in Ottawa.
The Trudeau Liberals will face a confidence vote in the House of Commons on their estimates for $87 billion in program spending during this pandemic. The Grits need the backing of one of the opposition parties, or the minority government could fall. However, the odds of that are now slim since the Prime Minister announced an extension to the emergency response benefit, a key demand from the NDP. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, countries will be voting on the two temporary members of the Security Council, and Canada's up against Norway and Ireland. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has placed a lot of significance and resources behind his multi-year campaign, so a loss could be politically embarrassing. Trudeau acknowledges the pandemic changed the dynamics of this tight race.
To reflect on our multilateral institutions and how they can be improved given this crisis.
No matter what happens, he says Canada's more engaged on the world stage. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
680 News Time 7:08. The four candidates vying to lead the federal Conservative Party will be facing off tonight in their first debate. The debate's being held in French, but none of the candidates is fluently bilingual. Tonight's debate will be a key indicator if Leslyn Lewis, Peter MacKay, Aaron O'Toole, or Derek Sloan can manage to debate the issues in one of the country's two official languages. MacKay's French is expected to be under the microscope, with his campaign having made several mistakes earlier on in the race. A second debate will be held in English tomorrow. Both are taking place here in downtown Toronto and will be live streamed. The party was originally set to pick a new leader June 27th, but the date was pushed back because of the pandemic. A winner is expected to be announced in late August.
Insurance companies have provided $685 million in relief to Ontario drivers during the COVID-19 pandemic. But the province's finance minister says more should be done. The regulatory body says about 70% of policyholders are receiving some form of relief, with an average savings of $150. The Financial Services Regulatory Authority says that amounts to about 5% of the total annual premiums Ontario drivers pay. Provincial Finance Minister Rod Phillips says 10 out of the 14 major insurance companies have provided rebates. He says they'll look at the companies not supporting their customers and publicly name them if necessary.
This is 680 News. Soccer fans are rejoicing this week as the Premier League returns to action today. Our Simon Bennett is the latest from the UK.
The Premier League returns to action today with two matches after 100 days away. 92 games to be crammed in the next 40 days, and with no fans, final results can be unpredictable. ESPN's Taylor Twellman was in Timmins.
You're going to see teams that we thought were given and actually come back down to the middle of the pack because that home field advantage is completely gone.
Liverpool is a 25-point lead atop the table. They would be in a position to clinch their first league title in 30 years this weekend if second-place Man City loses to Arsenal today. The events of the past 100 days not forgotten. There will be a moment of silence before matches this week in honor of those who died from COVID-19. Nameplates on the back of jerseys to be replaced with the words Black Lives Matter. I'm Simon Bennett.
This is 680 News.
The big summer sale has arrived at Dodge Garage Doors. Save hundreds of dollars on garage doors with our summer blowout sale. Buy Canada's top quality Dodge door now and get 0% financing from Dodge Garage Doors. That's right, 0% financing. Offer.
It's just after the end of the business day in Beijing, so they should have something interesting, I think. Oh, but they watched them. Nobody's gonna mention this fucking aerosol airborne shit. They're not. We heard it. I heard it twice. Dr. Kulak. I don't know how to spell that. That makes me wonder though. Because that is a trap. Whoever types in Dr. Kulak, the GPS and the Google Maps tunes in. Or voice print that person and then track them. I shouldn't get but it's really weird when I can see that my hands are right. It's like I'm hiding under the fucking table. What are you doing? There we go. Wagwan, China gal.
So I think that made the Indian domestic tensions arise and make the military give the military much more bigger voice. So I think this is also relates to the balance between the minister and the military side of India.
Then how will this affect India's image in the region?
Yes, I think so. Let's see if they can. So we need to go back to look at their domestic factors or problems. If they cannot solve the problem, and they may be much more aggressive towards its neighbors and try to, you mentioned, to distract domestic attentions, right? But we look at another part, and if they do so, that will detox the domestic situation, will not help them to solve the problem.
Also, a recent news, Beijing-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank said it approved a $750 million loan to India to help India fight the negative impact of the COVID-19 on poor. Will military clash along the border affect economic cooperation like this? How do you assess the aftermath of the border clashes?
Yeah, definitely the border confrontation definitely will affect the bilateral relations. But I think that is for the short-term effect. And I think for the Chinese leaders, we look at a very long, from the very long perspective to look at the bilateral relations. If we're looking back when the Donglang confrontation in 2017, the Chinese President Xi Jinping invited Indian minister visited China and both lead and also attend the BRICS summit. And I think the both leaders reached the agreement, and they put the foundation for the bilateral relations. So I think if we look at the big picture, for the short term, maybe affect the bilateral relations. But if we look at the big picture from the long term perspective, I think we Chinese would like to cooperate with India, would like to help India to combat the pandemic and help to increase our investment in India.
Thanks for your time tonight, Professor Chu.
Thank you.
So that's Professor Chu Bo from China Foreign Affairs University. Coming up, we'll take a look at the new tensions in Korean Peninsula. This is World Today. Stay with us.
Ever worried that you'll miss out on breaking events? Tune in to Today to get the latest news and analysis on the important stories in China and around the globe. Today, illuminating the news that matters to you.
You're listening to World Today. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea blew up a joint liaison office with the Republic of Korea. The move represents a major setback of the inter-Korean relations. So Shen Han has more from Seoul.
The Inter-Korean Liaison Office exploding into rubble. And going down along with it, any hope for possible reconciliation between South Korea and the DPRK. Pyongyang carrying through with its threat to demolish the office in response to South Korean civic groups flying propaganda leaflets across the border.
The relevant department has moved to completely destroy the North-South Liaison Office in the Kaesong Industrial Zone. This comes in the wake of cutting off all communication lines between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and South Korea.
The office served as an unofficial embassy, where meetings were held to discuss cross-border matters. But when the U.S. DPRK summit in Hanoi fell apart without an agreement, activity at the office waned. And when the coronavirus pandemic hit earlier this year, the office was shut down. South Korea is not backing down from the DPRK's latest move.
I didn't know they were trying to do that first.
We are making clear that the North is entirely responsible for all the consequences this might cause.
The demolition did not come entirely as a surprise. DPRK state media, quoting Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, forewarning the South just 3 days prior. And with tensions on the Korean Peninsula rising, neighboring countries are calling for restraint.
The DPRK and South Korea are of the same people. As a close neighbor, China has always hoped for the Korean Peninsula to maintain peace and stability.
Meanwhile, the DPRK military
one crazy family that's just ruining that. They're not even rich. I don't know how the fuck that
areas
happened.
along the border that had recently been demilitarized. South Korea Defense Ministry saying it will react strongly to any sort of military provocation. Now, coincidence or not, next week happens to be the 70th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War back in the mid-20th century.
That's Shen Ham reports from Seoul. So to discuss more on this, we're joined on the line by Professor Shen-Ding Li from Institute of International Studies, Fudan University. Welcome, Professor Shen.
Thank you.
So blown up the liaison office, a promise made by Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong days ago that DPRK will take a next action against the enemy South Korea. So is this a radical move to you? Why would the DPRK take such an action?
Well, we should not only look at this incident from South Korean's perspective. We should also listen to DPRK's perspective. DPRK and ROK people, yes, they are one people, but they are different countries. All countries are equal. No country should provoke the other country. Some people, they initially they are the people of South Korea, and some people who left North Korea to join South Korea, that's fine. But they gathered in Gimpo, which is close to North Korea, flying the biggest balloon to bring those propaganda material, which is negative and hostile to North Korea. They also fly some US dollar and some communication chips, etc. These are viewed as hostile. DPRK made it very clear, don't do. They are two different countries. They are equal countries. No country should ever do this against another country. So South Korea is wrong by having this for such a long time, and DPRK has protested again, and they have a habit, maybe a bad habit. When they are provoked, they make threat. And they have a pattern, basically they honor this threat. So when they blow up the building, it's not a surprise because they have had the early warning, and they said you have to stop it. If President Moon Jae-in would not stop such a behavior, and those so-called NGO people in South Korea would continue to send the balloon to South Korea, I think they are going to destroy the hard-achieved Pyongyang Declaration and Panmunjom Declaration. That's very unfortunate.
Then do we know what the DPRK is demanding now after blowing up the liaison office?
Their demand is simple. Don't fly the balloon. Don't launch hostile behavior against us, as all this are against the Panmunjom Declaration and the Pyongyang Declaration. And even without such a declaration, these acts are against the UN Charter. All countries are equal. All countries' sovereignty should be respected. You cannot apply a physical subject to another country's land or to their territorial space.
Can't tax them.
And those NGO people in South Korea kept doing it. And the South Korean government, which is so capable, failed to stop it. That's beyond apprehension.
After Pyongyang's announcement that you will redeploy soldiers to its border with South Korea, and South Korea threatened the neighbor would pay the price, so are we going to see some retaliation from South Korea?
Well, they are reopening the older mode of tension escalation. But I don't think that would be more severe than the time when DPRK was testing long-range missile and nuclear explosive. So it will be more threatening, but not that threatening. DPRK still treasure the hard-achieved consensus to build a unity, to build oneness, many efforts. So they have made measured response to South Korea's hostility. They blow up the building, but we have heard no casualty. A day or 2 days ago, we heard a casualty from the border clash between China and India. That's very unfortunate. That's the first time for the last 45 years. But North Korea has made it possible not to have any casualty because they don't want to escalate to that level. So why we feel bad DPRK used such a very direct and violent way to generate unhealthy atmosphere between the two Koreans. And we should also search for the reason how to analyze DPRK is still taking measured effort, not unlimited push for the degeneration of relationship.
Some have called U.S. President Donald Trump the treatment of DPRK a political tool, and the tension that in the region has something to do with U.S. interference. Do you share the same view? How do you assess the U.S. factor in the context of inter-Korean relations?
Well, again, DPRK and South Korea's tension has a chicken and egg problem. And it's harder to analyze who initiated the very earliest provocation. The same pattern applies to the relationship between Washington and Pyongyang. Pyongyang said it's due to the U.S. hostility that the DPRK need to build its strategic weapon. And the U.S. thought it's Pyongyang's repeated violation of its commitment to denuclearization that has made America not to believe in North Korea. So unless DPRK would tolerate denuclearize itself, the U.S. would not lift any sanction. It has been for those that have been imposed. So DPRK say, why you don't give me some benefit if I do something right? U.S. say, because you lied. I would never trust you. You have to totally abandon before getting any return from my side. So U.S. DPRK mutually distrust each other. And the U.S. at this time, under Trump, gives no opportunity for DPRK for any parallel progress. DPRK does something, U.S. want to do something in response to DPR's good behavior. And such a kind of a U.S. deep distrust of North Korea created a very complicated phenomenon. For South Korea, they don't like the U.S. behavior. They want the U.S. to be more flexible, to be more kind of proactive. I think the South Korean government does not like the U.S. behavior, but at the same time, they are sure that the U.S. would be on their side. This kind of a very complicated U.S. behavior that is not healthy, which is not kind of productive for a better North and South inter-Korean relationship.
So generally speaking, where are the inter-Korean relations headed now? Do you see a further deteriorating situation?
It's likely, but I think both South and North Korean leaders are smart. And President Moon Jae-in made bet North Korea may not honor its threat, but he was wrong. And I think I deeply trust in him. He really wants to have a better relationship. He does not want to distrust the inter-Korean relationship. So I bet he would have a domestic fight to restrain the wrong behavior of those South Korean-based anti-North Korean NGOs. But of course, he has to fight with those deeply rooted South Korean-based conservatives. It's not an easy battle, but he would do it. As long as he would do it, North Korea would not honor its threat by sending lots of troops to the border area. But they, for their own political correctness, for their own honor, for their own faith, they would do something. But how much North Korea would depend upon what President Moon would do in relieving the legitimate concern of North Korea.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Professor Shen.
Thank you.
That's Professor Shenzhen Li from Institute of International Studies, Fudan University. Coming up, African nations seek UN inquiry into U.S. racism and police brutality. This is World Today. We'll be back after the break.
Break. Is this actually live or is this a part? That's It's 30. This worked much faster than the last time. What the fuck? You know what? Let's go back to World Today because we're going to get nothing from this anyway. Alright. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 5, 6. It's almost loaded. 7, 8, 9, 10. No, it's not. Come on. There it is. It's faster than 45 seconds like the last time. Not this time. Before. I need oxygen.
Thank you. It's good to be on the show. So why do these African countries propose the idea of the debate?
So the representative of Burkina Faso to the UN submitted a letter in which he said the tragic event in Minneapolis in the US, which led to the death of George Floyd, led to protests throughout the world against injustice and police brutality that persons of African descent face on a daily basis in many regions of the world. That's he wrote in the letter, and he said the death of George Floyd is unfortunately not an isolated incident. He also said in the letter that it would be inconceivable if the Human Rights Council, that's the UN's top human rights body, does not address the issue. I think the council. The African countries proposed the idea of the debate because the incident of George Floyd reminds people of the treatment of people of African descent receive every day around the world, and especially the representatives to the United Nations Human Rights Council think it's time to speak up. It's not a good idea to wait and be silent on this anymore, and it's time to let people know that this is not right.
We see more than 20 senior African UN officials on Sunday called on the UN to make a decisive action on the systematic racism against the people of African descent and other minority groups in the United States. Then what kind of effect will the debate have on what's happening in the United States now? And if any, because we know US is not a part of the UN Human Rights Council, right?
This is a very interesting point because the president of the UN Human Rights Council specifically said that the issue was universal. She said, as you have seen with demonstrations all over the world, that including here in Geneva, this is a topic that's not just about one country. It's about, it goes well beyond that. And she specifically said this, quote, "When I said it's not against the United States, I mean there are complaints about a lot of racism in many countries of the world. Of course in Europe, but not only, you will find it all over the world," unquote. So I think she's being a little bit of diplomatic and also sensitive about the issue here, because of course the George Floyd case happened in America. As you have said, there's a bit of efforts of not pointing the finger to America here, and also to make sure people realize that racism is a problem that's seen all over the world, not just in one country. But I would say I can't say I'm confident to say that there will be any effect on what's happening in America. For one thing, because America is not part of the council. It quit about 2 years ago. But I think UN Human Rights Council, as the top UN's top human rights body, raising this issue and also talking about it, it will help to raise awareness around the world, where I think the issue hasn't been taken seriously enough, especially in places in America where racism is just such a big problem. And it of course it won't be days or years or even generations before the problem is solved, but I think we are like raising awareness around the world is one step towards that.
Have we seen any response from the U.S. government yet? If not, how do you think they will respond?
I have looked up. There hasn't been any response yet. And if I don't know, if I were the anyone who's in the Department of State who's responsible for, you know, taking care of this kind of thing, I probably don't want to respond, because the president of the United Nations Human Rights Council already said this is not about you. So don't just stand up and say, okay, I have to respond to say that, you know, something like I'm opposing this or I condemn this. But if the council somehow release a statement saying something about the U.S. government, probably I think the U.S. State Department should say something. But I don't want to predict on the content of that statement or response yet.
Now, will the letter signed by senior leaders in the UN who are asking for more than condemnation of racism have any effect on racism in the world?
I think that would be, my answer to this would be similar to what I said about, you know, the UN Human Rights Council debate on the effect of what's going on in the United States and all of the world. It's a helpful step towards, you know, letting people know that this is not right. But I don't see any tangible, you know, outcome yet. But I think it's a good sign that people are really, you know, taking this seriously, as serious as they should be taken.
Yeah. So why is the death of George Floyd causing anger and protest all over the world? What's behind people's outrage? Could you brief us a little bit on this?
I think especially the image, the video of George Floyd, you know, crying out. I think there was at one point he cried for his mom. I think that just reminded people of, you know, the basic humanity that everyone in the world has, and it just reminds people of racism and police brutality all over the world in different countries. And you see in France, there's protest against police violence against brown people, and in Germany, slogans like "Germany, you are not innocent." So this is becoming it's kind of it's amazing to see the solidarity around the world about this whole thing. Another thing before I go here, I think surviving a pandemic. And also amid a global economic meltdown caused a lot of anxiety and loneliness. And also people who once see America as a beacon are now kind of sad and disappointed.
Thanks for your insights, Liu Kun. That's Leo Kun, CRI's former correspondent in Washington, D.C. China and Africa is to host a special summit on solidarity against COVID-19. The video conference is to begin in less than half an hour. Before that, we reached out to one African country, the Republic of Mozambique, to find out how China and Mozambique join hands in fighting the pandemic. Here's our Xu Yawen speaking with Mozambique's ambassador to China, Ms. Maria Gustava.
Ambassador Gustava, as we know, China was first hit by coronavirus last winter. Although a cluster of locally transmitted infections was identified this week, overall it's under control. In the meantime, the virus is gradually spreading throughout Africa. So what cooperation are you seeing between China and Mozambique, and how will it be effective in fighting the epidemic?
Mozambique is also affected by the COVID-19. I think, as you know, Mozambique declared the state of emergency. So we in the second month of the state of the emergency, which means that there is no international flight allowed to come to the country at the moment. At the beginning, because we have very deep and close relationship with China, and this relationship is really not only for cooperation but the friendship. There is a deep friendship between the two countries, two people, and it's coming from a long time ago. So which means when we heard that China was facing this challenge, our president was one of the first one who sent the message of condolence to the people and the government of China through the President Xi Jinping. And also there was a lot of solidarity, not only from people, our students living here in China. They were sending a message of giving strength to the Chinese people and showing that we are together, we should fight together this pandemic. And now that Mozambique is being affected as well, China also is not sitting and watching. They are doing something which they are giving some assistance through a video conference with our doctor to change the experience. And also they are giving some donation through the mask and other kind of things that can help our government to fight this pandemic.
How will the COVID-19 outbreak affect an already strained food supply, given that hundreds of thousands of people in Mozambique are still recovering from the devastation following last year's Cyclone Idai?
Indeed, our country is going through a lot of, I would say, hardship. And not only the Idai, for the last years we are being facing droughts, floods, and this Idai was another natural disaster that came on top of what we have been facing. And we think that the climate change must be one of those factors that is making that the country is prone to these disasters lately. So you can imagine that the country is facing with all these challenges, and now with the COVID. So this is the impact is going to lower the standard of living for people, for sure. And in terms of the poverty, also is going to create more problem, because now with the COVID, the people that cannot go out there and produce, they're staying at home and doing nothing, and which is going to create a problem in terms of the food security for our people after we come out of this pandemic. That's for sure. That's for sure. The government is trying to do their best to mobilize the few that they can still go and produce the food, but also the government has to be cautious about the impact of the COVID, that the people, they cannot go out there in large number of people.
Talking about food security, China and African countries jointly launched the Agricultural Technology Demonstration Centers, and in Mozambique, the demonstration center put into use in 2011. Looking back almost 10 years, what has been the success of the program, and Is it adequately addressing food shortages?
This project is really very positive in terms of the impact in two ways, because now we have the Chinese experts that normally they work in this center. They are transmitting their knowledge to our people on how to improve the seed and how to improve the method of agriculture for the seed food security. So it's very positive, and it has impact in terms of the agriculture system in our country because of the training and also to spread the good practice. And at the same time, we have a project there for agriculture that we have a project from CAD Fund in province of Gaza, which is called the Wambao. So this project also is very good for the rice production, which means that we think that apart from the government of China giving the assistance, also I wanted to invite the private sector of China to go to Mozambique to invest in agriculture, because Mozambique has got all the potential for the agriculture to do well if you have all the technology and the funds to do so. We have a lot of land, very fertile land with the water from the rivers. So I wanted to invite the private sector to invest in agriculture apart from the side of the government in terms of this institute, and apart from the other way that the government of China is doing in Mozambique. So which means that there's a need for combined action from the government and all stakeholders in this direction for agriculture in terms of the food security and also for the export.
And lastly, how do you assess Sino-Mozambique relations?
As I mentioned at the beginning, our relationship is very good. Mozambique and China, they start having the relationship at the time when Mozambique was struggling for the independence. This month is a very special month. We are going to celebrate the 45th anniversary of the independence of Mozambique, and China contributed very positively for this independence because they were there helping the liberation movement for the Mozambique to become independent. So we are going to celebrate the 45. So you can see how long we have been together. And at the same time, you can see it is coincide with the celebration of the anniversary of the diplomatic relationship between Mozambique and China. So China was one of the first country to recognize Mozambique as independent and establish diplomatic relations with Mozambique. So our relationship is very deep and rooted from the long time, and it's very positive because if you look at what we have done so far in terms of the cooperation, it's huge, and you can see the result of this relationship in concrete buildings, roads, and things that are happening for the betterment of the people of Mozambique. At the same time, for the betterment of the living of the Chinese, because the Chinese, they can do the business in Mozambique through this relationship. So I foresee the future that is bright because we have experience, and from what was a positive from this experience, we have to consolidate. And also, we have to expand more, and we need to strengthen the relationship people to people, because for the acknowledgement of the two sides, in terms of cultural relationship, and the youth, because the youth also is the legacy of this relationship to grow further. And also for the private sector, I see the association, our private sector and the Chinese private sector, they should make the partnership and to see what they can do together for their business in terms of the business. So I foresee that there's a lot that can be done because there's a two principle that is there: trust there is trust between the two countries. And also there is a commitment between the two countries, and there is a friendship between the two countries. So from all these principles, we can do more and further.
That's Mozambique ambassador to China, Ms. Maria Gustava, speaking with Xu Yawen. Hong Kong tumbles down the World Competitiveness Ranking. You are listening to World Today. Stay with us.
In-depth analysis, valuable insights, expert views, presented by an award-winning team. Today, keeping you well-informed, up-to-date, and ahead of the news.
The Hong Kong SAR government stresses the importance of its stability as Hong Kong drops 3 places in terms of global competitiveness. Hong Kong is now ranked 5th in the latest World Competitiveness published by the Switzerland-based International Institute for Management Development, down from 2nd place last year. So for more on this, our Zhao Yang earlier spoke to Andy Mock, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization.
So, Andy, first of all, for the World Competitiveness Ranking, researchers assessed the data from 63 economies measuring economic performance, government efficiency, business efficiency, and infrastructure areas. So, what are key criteria for this ranking, and what does it tell us?
Well, you just mentioned a few of them, John, but I think it really boils down to 3 things. One, the market opportunity, meaning just how much money potentially can be made. Second, what is the risk of doing business there? And the risk there is not just to capital, but also to people, because especially in today's increasingly information-centric world, the most valuable asset any business has are its people. So risk is the second. And then finally, just the ease of doing business, meaning how convenient is it, how smooth is it, how transparent is it. So, all the criteria that are measured, I think we can just boil them down to those 3: the size of the market opportunity, the risk of doing business, and the ease of doing business.
And Hong Kong SAR came in at 5th this year. This is a far cry from the 2nd, which it enjoyed the last year. So why is it? What do you make of the main reasons of that?
Well, I think this is very unfortunate because Hong Kong has all of the ingredients for success. The most important is being on the doorstep of China, which we all know has been just the growth story, not just the modern era, but probably all of human civilization. But unfortunately, Hong Kong has been caught up in this geopolitical contest between the U.S. and China. And again, given its proximity to China, it's unfortunately been used as a pawn and as the base of sabotage and subversion. And we've seen the terrible effect that this has had on Hong Kong's competitiveness.
And in response to the ranking, a spokesperson of the Hong Kong SAR government noted that the social unrest dealt a severe blow to the inbound tourism, to the local consumption activities and investment sentiment in the second half of last year. So how has that pushed Hong Kong's economy into recession? And what is the implications?
Well, as you said, Zhao Yang, the protests that have morphed into riots have made people feel physically unsafe, and it's also had a negative impact on business confidence independent of that. So of course that will affect Hong Kong's ability to do business. And again, being on the doorstep of China, it makes it difficult for it to take advantage of the opportunities that China offers. But we also can't overlook the fact that Hong Kong got hit by a double whammy because also the COVID-19 pandemic had a global impact on economic growth around the world. And Hong Kong being so integrated, of course, suffered as a result of that as well.
And so what can boost the business confidence in Hong Kong at this moment?
Well, I think the good news is that, of course, the last year has been an awful one for Hong Kong. But the good news is that brighter days are ahead. We've seen that the National People's Congress in China has authorized the Standing Committee to draft a national security law and that has an important signaling effect. But I think also this gives both the Hong Kong local authorities as well as the Chinese mainland authorities to root out and bring to justice both domestic as well as foreign saboteurs that are undermining the stability and the prosperity of Hong Kong. So I think looking ahead, perhaps in the next year, things should be much better for Hong Kong. However, what the big question mark still remains, what's going to happen with COVID-19? I think this is the other aspect that we don't know. But in terms of the protests, the riots, the unrest, I think we've taken a very important step towards solving that problem.
And also in this report, the U.S. has also dropped from the 3rd spot to the 10th in this world competitive ranking this year. So how do you explain that? The report cited trade wars as a key factors. So what's its impact on the U.S. competitiveness ranking?
No, of course, I think the trade war, in particular the tariffs, have been a negative it had a negative impact on American competitiveness because, one, it raises the cost of doing business. And the U.S., of course, as a end market, whether we're talking about a business enterprise market or a consumer market, is very important. But also because given the complexity and sophistication of global supply chains, products need to move back and forth sometimes to many countries before it reaches its final customer. So the tariffs add cost. Sometimes if a product needs to move several times or the components need to be moved several times, that can increase costs significantly, reducing competitiveness. But the more subtle problem is that this has introduced tremendous uncertainty and caused a huge drop in confidence in the United States, because what the U.S. has done, or the administration has done, is weaponized the global supply chain. And now no one knows who might be the next victim. So as a result, I think more and more companies are thinking about avoiding the U.S. If possible.
And what are other criteria resulting in America's decline in the rankings?
Well, there's other factors as well. So it's not just the trade war. But I think when we look at how COVID-19 was handled, one of the most important things I think global investors, global business look for is sound and competent governance. And there's been a lot of surprise around the world at how the U.S. seems to very badly mishandled COVID-19. So of course that raises questions and affects business confidence. The riots, the protests, Black Lives Matter, also I think reveal very significant flaws in American governance. Again, without confidence in government, it can be very hard for business to do well, however attractive the market might be.
And Singapore also topped the competitiveness rankings for the 2nd year in a row, thanks to its strong economic performance driven by robust international trade and investment, as well as its employment and labor market measures. So from your perspective, what are the advantages of Singapore that can make it top the ranking for 2 years in a row? And why is it most competitive on the list?
Well, I think, that's a great point. I mean, in a way, Singapore is the opposite of the U.S. because Singapore is known for the competence of its government, from everything from the way they select and promote their government officials, the way they're compensated, the policies that they undertake, their ability to execute those decisions. I think really positions Singapore very well, because when we look at Singapore, of course, it's a city-state. It's not a continental country like the U.S., like China, like India. So in this way, perhaps it's easier to govern, but still, governing is not easy anywhere. And I think the biggest advantage that Singapore has is the competence of its government, and that, of course, gives business, whether we're talking about local business people or global enterprises, tremendous confidence. And I think that's why many companies choose to base their regional headquarters in Singapore.
That's all the time for this edition of World Today. Thank you so much for joining us.
I am Alka Acharya. I teach at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. Today has organized its programs and is stressed on bringing in a lot of views from all over. It is an extremely good platform for information and analysis, and I wish it all success in the future.
You're listening to The Today Show, with in-depth coverage of global events with a different perspective. Expert guests from around the world sharing their views and debating issues closely related to the world today. To hear this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast. Go to our official website, www.chinaplus.cri.cn, and listen to our show every day, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Beijing time. You can also download the app of Easy FM or China Plus in the App Store with news and analysis today. Keeps you informed and inspired.
Ever worried that you'll miss out on breaking events? Tune in to Today to get the latest news and analysis on the important stories in China and around the world.
Is it good or bad?
Today,
is it good or bad if you grow up and you and Keanu Reeves look, almost the same? That's wrong. That is so wrong. I should really, he's got the bags and shit.
Online, on air, and on your phone. Take Today wherever you go and stay ahead of what's changing our world. From politics and the economy to business and technology. Today covers regional and international. National issues that affect China.
Now the news. I'm Su Yi. Beijing has conducted nucleic acid tests on around 356,000 people as part of the city's efforts to contain the resurgence of domestically transmitted COVID-19 cases. The tests have been conducted on people working in a wholesale market from where initial cases emerged. The tests also cover residents in nearby communities, people who visited the market, and workers in farm produce markets across the city. Beijing reported 31 newly confirmed domestically transmitted COVID-19 cases and 6 new asymptomatic cases on Tuesday. China says clinical trials of an inactivated COVID-19 vaccine candidate have shown promising results in both safety and efficacy. The vaccine is developed by the Wuhan Institute of Biological Products under the China National Biotech Group. China National Pharmaceutical Group, the parent company, says no cases of severe adverse effects were found in the first 2 phases of clinical trials. The China National Biotech Group is actively promoting overseas cooperation in the phase 3 clinical trial of the vaccine. It has secured the intention of cooperation of several companies and research institutions from other countries. China is urging India to stop its aggression at the shared border between the 2 countries following a physical clash in the Galwan Valley region on Monday. 3 Indian servicemen were reportedly killed in the violent face-off, but China has not given the exact number of casualties. The incident came less than 10 days after the 2 sides reached a consensus on easing the situation in the border area at a commander-level meeting. The Chinese Foreign Ministry is blaming Indian forces for violating the consensus, illegally crossing the border and attacking Chinese soldiers. It demands the Indian side restrain its frontline troops, refrain from crossing the border, and not take unilateral action that may complicate the situation. A senior North Korean official says his government will not sit together with authorities of South Korea, adding that there will be neither exchange nor cooperation in the future. Pyongyang cut off all communication lines with Seoul a week ago and blew up the joint liaison office building in Kaesong Industrial Zone near the border with South Korea on Tuesday. The liaison office was established in September 2018 as part of the Panmunjom Declaration signed by the 2 sides. Pyongyang has also rejected a plea from South Korea to send special envoys to the north to ease the current tensions on the peninsula. Relations between the two countries soured this month as Pyongyang protested against anti-North Korea leaflets flung across the border by South Korean civic groups. New Zealand and Britain formally launched free trade negotiations on Wednesday. New Zealand says it looks forward to a free trade agreement that opens up more opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses. Britain is New Zealand's sixth largest trading partner. Two-way trade totaled about $3.9 billion last year. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order that he says will reform police practices while maintaining law and order in the country. The order, signed on Tuesday, follows weeks of protests against police brutality over the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. It provides for the adoption of the latest standards of use of force and improve information sharing to avoid hiring officers with poor records. The order is seen as a policy response to rising concerns about racial injustice ahead of the November 3rd election. The Trump administration is suing former National Security Advisor John Bolton to block the publication of a book that the White House says contained classified information. The suit follows warnings from President Donald Trump that Bolton could face a criminal problem if it doesn't halt plans to publish the book. The administration says Bolton did not complete a pre-publication review to ensure that a manuscript did not contain classified material. But Bolton's attorney is accusing the White House of using national security concerns as a pretext to censor the former advisor. The first U.S. female spacewalker descended into the Challenger Deep in the Pacific Ocean, becoming the first woman to have done so. This has made Catherine Sullivan the first human to have been both in space and the deepest part of the ocean. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point in all 5 of the Earth's oceans. That's the news. I'm Sui.
Coming up next, Studio Plus. Unwind with us over some interesting insights, lighthearted humor, and trendy tunes. Chill out and share your opinions with us on Studio Plus.
Studio Plus, a feast of news, culture, and views. All right, let's go. Tune in to meet some fascinating people, share their stories.
China is one of the great creative countries.
Old Beijing style.
Exclusively Chinese music.
Studio Plus, something fresh. Then add in your mushroom, something fun. Something more. Studio Plus. Studio Plus.
Some professor is going to talk about how inaccurate digital thermometers are. Police arrest 7 for some hotel shooting. Come on. How many is that? Oh, it's about 5 minutes. Fuck it. I'm gonna press whatever this is. Fuck. I guess it's 2 o'clock in South Africa.
Slow moving traffic if you're traveling on the M4 Ruth First Highway leaving Durban heading towards Mhlanga, and it's just a little before the La Lucia on-ramp. If you are traveling in the vicinity, expect delays and of course to approach with caution as traffic is a little slow there. Otherwise, there are no major incidents to report on if you're traveling on the N2 northbound and on the N2 southbound between Mhlanga and Amanzimtoti this afternoon, as well as on the N3 from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, and no major delays there. For the East Coast Radio Traffic Team, I'm Andy James.
Report traffic now to 33116.
But some slow-moving traffic on the N3 westbound, just a little after the Pavilion off-ramp. And if you're traveling on the M7 Edwin Swales this afternoon, a reminder that there's roadworks taking place near the Titran Road, and both directions are affected. And of course, the Bele and Wexley Road intersection remains closed to traffic. For the East Coast Radio Traffic Team, I'm Andy James.
Report traffic now. Tweet at ECR Traffic. On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
The Durban High Court has been shut down after a staff member contracted COVID-19. Cases scheduled to appear at the court from today will not be heard until further notice. Decontamination has begun at the building. Attorney Lasanthan Pillay, who frequents the High Court, says this will create a backlog in cases.
This is discussed in numerous ways. Firstly, we were supposed to go down there today to request some files, as clients want us to conduct work for them. And in those circumstances, we can't continue that work because the court has been closed. Further to that effect, we have matters that are set down at court, and we are not sure what's going to happen with those matters. If the court is closed indefinitely, we're not sure when the court is going to open. So those matters are going to be affected, and it's going to create a huge backlog at court.
Last month, the Durban Magistrate Court closed its doors when a staff member tested positive for the virus. Gauteng police have arrested suspects in connection with a mass shooting which left 6 dead at the Jabulani hostel in Soweto last week. A multidisciplinary team of detectives arrested 2 suspects in KZN and recovered 2 firearms, including an AK-47. Gauteng police spokesperson Ngotolo Kweza says the suspects led police to further 5 suspects in Gauteng.
We have arrested 2 suspects in KwaZulu-Natal and recovered firearms, including an AK-47. 2 suspects led us to further 5 suspects in Gauteng, and we also recovered firearms in Gauteng as well.
Seeing outside the province now, the first matric pupil in the Vaal has tested positive for COVID-19, leading to the Phoenix High School in Vereeniging to close its doors. The school's social media platforms informed parents that all the right procedures had been followed, adding the school will be sanitized before it reopens again on Monday, the 22nd of June. And Taliban fighters killed at least 12 Afghan security personnel in a pre-dawn raid on a northern checkpoint, officials say. The latest violence claimed by the insurgents. 4 security force members were also captured by the militants in the attack in the Jawazan province. Our top story this hour, the Durban High Court has been shut down after a staff member contracted COVID-19. Cases scheduled to appear at the court from today will not be heard until further notice. For the Newswatch team, I'm Martin Naika.
We got an accident on Silver Glen Drive in the Chatsworth area. Emergency officials are in attendance on that accident scene, of course, to give way to emergency vehicles and to approach with caution. Then we got a stationary vehicle on the N2 northbound after Inanda Road, and it's in the left lane. For the East Coast Radio Traffic Team, I'm Andy James.
Report traffic now. Call 031 566 3534. On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
arrested suspects in connection with a mass shooting which left 6 dead at the Jabulani hostel in Soweto last week. A multidisciplinary team of detectives arrested 2 suspects in KZN and recovered 2 firearms, including an AK-47. Sanwatolo Kweza says the suspects in KZN led police to further 5 in Gauteng.
We have arrested 2 suspects in KwaZulu-Natal and recovered firearms, including an AK-47. The 2 suspects led us to further 5 suspects in Gauteng, and we also recovered firearms in Gauteng as well.
KwaMashu commuters may have to wait a little longer for railway services to resume. Passenger rail agency PRASA has warned the community that train services will be stopped for good if acts of vandalism and the dumping of debris on railway tracks continue. A fire gutted around more than 100 homes and left 4 people hurt in A section near the Thembalihle train station on Monday. Train operations have been suspended since the start of the lockdown. PRASA spokesperson Zama Nomganga.
People are vandalizing the assets of PRASA, people are stealing, and also when we try to fix here, they are stealing somewhere. Now that is going to lead us to not resume the services as we planned to assist our commuters. If they are harming PRASA, they are also harming themselves. These assets that belong to them, we need to respect, we need to make sure that we protect.
Mganga says cases of assault have also been opened by PRASA employees.
Whoever that is beating up or is assaulting civil servants, like our drivers and our protection services security, if you are found, I repeat, if you are caught with those, and if you are caught assaulting one of us, that will be treason. You'll go to jail and no bail will be offered to you.
And says it will block ads from foreign state media during the US election, as well as allowing users to hide all paid-for political messages. The move comes with the social media giant under growing pressure of its hands-off approach to misinformation and inflammatory posts, including from Donald Trump, and following criticism it turned a blind eye to foreign interference in the 2016 presidential poll. Our top story this hour, Gauteng police have arrested suspects in connection with a mass shooting which left 6 dead at the Jabulani hostel in Soweto last week. A multidisciplinary team of detectives arrested 2 suspects in KZN and recovered 2 firearms, including an AK-47. For the Newswatch team, I'm Myron Naika.
So that is serious, eh?
On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
KwaMashu commuters may have to wait a little longer for the railway services to resume there. Passenger rail agency PRASA has warned the community that train services will be stopped for good if acts of vandalism and the dumping of debris on railway tracks continue. A fire gutted around 100 homes and left 4 people hurt in A section near the Thembalihle train station on Monday. Train operations have been suspended since the start of the lockdown. PRASA spokesperson Zama Nomganga.
People are vandalizing the assets of PRASA, people are stealing, and also when we try to fix here, they are stealing somewhere. Now that is going to lead us to not resume the services as we planned to assist our commuters. If they are harming PRASA, they are also harming themselves. These assets to them, we need to respect, we need to make sure that we protect.
Nomganga says cases of assault have been also opened by PRASA employees.
Whoever that is beating up or is assaulting civil servants, like our drivers and our protection services security, if you are found, I repeat, if you are caught with those, and if you are caught assaulting one of us, that will be treason. You'll go to jail and no bail will be offered to you.
Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says behavioral changes for life with COVID-19 need to be reinforced over and over again. Mkhize launched a ministerial advisory committee to focus on social behavioral change. The team's made up of leaders from faith-based groups, civil society and labor unions. He says as we reopen the economy, we'll have to adjust to living with something that feels unnatural.
The fact that the numbers are going up, unfortunately in our situation, the amount of economic distress, social distress, mean that we will have to ensure that we coexist with this viral infection. There is no way of closing down everything and then wait until we've completely defeated the virus. We have to defeat the virus whilst we try to rebuild our lives and our economy. And therefore, our focus on building lives.
If you do not, I will send you to Grandpa, drop up.
And New Zealand's put a military leader in charge of its border quarantine measures after 2 women brought coronavirus back into the country from the UK. It had gone more than 3 weeks without reporting any new cases. They'd flown from London and been allowed to leave quarantine to visit a dying parent, even though one had symptoms. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has given her reaction.
This case represents an unacceptable failure of the system. It should never have happened, and it cannot be repeated.
Another look at our top story. Commercial commuters may have to wait a little longer for railway services to resume. That's it from the Newswatch team for now. You can have a look at our top stories online at ecr.co.za.
On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says behavioral changes for life with COVID-19 need to be reinforced over and over again. He launched a ministerial advisory committee to focus on social behavioral change. The team's made up of leaders from faith-based groups, civil society, and labor unions. He says as we reopen the economy, we'll have to adjust to living with something that feels unnatural.
The fact that the numbers are going up, unfortunately, in our situation, the amount of economic distress, social distress, mean that we will have to ensure that we coexist with this viral infection. There is no way of closing down everything and then wait until we've completely defeated the virus. We have to defeat the virus whilst we try to rebuild our lives and our economy. And therefore, our focus on building lives lively.
Mkhize says South Africa needs to get used to a new culture.
This is the culture that we need to build. That culture can only become people for partners, social partners on the ground. I will be emphasizing the need for that. So hope therefore that we'll be able to create this partnership at the ward level, at a district level, and so that everyone out there knows. There's only one message that our president's given us, that is to hold each other's hands to fight with this virus.
Meanwhile, KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala says the province's economy needs disciplined and committed young leaders. He hosted the first ever virtual Youth Day commemoration yesterday. The theme for this year's Youth Day was Youth Power, Growing South Africa Together in a Period of COVID-19.
The provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal has deeply invested in the success of young people of our
Where's the mouse? Where's the cursor? On the cursor. There it is. Okay, 1, 2, 3. No, good. Let's try that.
On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
Has hailed the massive breakthrough by British researchers working to find a drug to treat coronavirus. It's a common steroid that's inexpensive and has been shown to improve survival rates for patients seriously ill. It's been found to reduce deaths by a third among those patients in hospital on ventilators, but it doesn't have any benefit for people whose lungs are working normally. Professor Martin Landry from Oxford University, who's behind the research, says the trial's been conducted at record-breaking speed.
We wrote the first protocol on 10th of March. By the 19th of March, the first patient was in the trial, 10 days. 8 weeks later, 10,000 patients had been recruited. 3 months later, and here are the first results showing the benefit. There's never been a trial conducted at that speed, at that scale.
Here, our health ministry says hospitals may consider using the steroid dexamethasone on certain patients. The treatment reduces deaths by about a fifth for those needing oxygen masks. The total number of coronavirus-related fatalities in our country has climbed to 1,625. The number of confirmed cases has risen to 76,334. As Newswatch's Lauren Bucas reports, it's a significant increase of 2,801 from Monday.
89 new infections have been recorded in KwaZulu-Natal, pushing the province's total number of cases to 4,048. The death tolls increased to 73. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says the mortality rate is now at 2.1% and there have been 42,063 recoveries nationwide. He's also commented on Britain's research into a common steroid drug which has been shown to improve survival rates for patients who are seriously ill with coronavirus. The minister says they want to assess the full outcomes of the trial, but in the meantime, intravenous or oral doses of dexamethasone may be considered for 10 days for coronavirus patients who are being mechanically ventilated. Mkhize says the steroid may be considered for those admitted to hospital with COVID-19 and require oxygen support, especially those needing high-flow nasal oxygen or non-invasive ventilation. Lauren Bucas, East Coast Radio Newswatch.
A KZN youth group has stood in silence on the streets of eSikhawini, Richards Bay and Mpangeni on Youth Day to protest against gender-based violence. The Umbuzo Muhle Foundation says it wants to send a clear message that no is no. The country's been rocked by new cases of gender-based violence with women killed. As South Africa marked Youth Day yesterday, the group took placards to the streets. Nkulisi Buthelezi says fear should not be normalized.
Everyone is focused on the vision of the current generation to send a clear message out there that we're fighting against this scourge. It's so immoral, it's so discouraging that as a society, we are, instead of fighting for economic emancipation, we are fighting at gender-based violence.
Now, they ended their protest by visiting rural communities where they distributed sanitary towels to girls and women. Our lead update, the head of the World Health Organization has hailed the massive breakthrough by British researchers working to find a drug to treat coronavirus. That's it from the East Coast Radio Newswatch team for now. I'm Atara Nadesan.
On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
Says hospitals may consider using a steroid drug that British researchers say reduces deaths by around a third for COVID-19 patients on ventilators and by about a fifth for those needing oxygen masks. Another 57 people diagnosed with COVID-19 have died in our country. 4 of these deaths were in KZN, bringing the total number of coronavirus-related fatalities so far to 1,625. South Africa's total number of confirmed cases has risen to 76,334. As Newswatch's Lauren Bucas reports, that's a significant increase of 2,801 from Monday.
But you listed a higher number.
KwaZulu-Natal, pushing the province's total number of cases to 4,048. The death tolls increased to 73. The Western Cape has most number of fatalities and infections at 1,200 and over 45,000 respectively. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says the mortality rate's now at 2.1% and there have been 42,063 recoveries nationwide. He's also commented on Britain's research into a common steroid drug which has been shown to improve survival rates for patients who are seriously ill with coronavirus. The minister says they want to assess the full outcomes of the trial, but in the meantime, intravenous or oral doses of dexamethasone may be considered for 10 days for coronavirus patients who are being mechanically ventilated. Mkhize says the steroid may be considered for those admitted to hospital with COVID-19 and require oxygen support, especially those needing high-flow nasal oxygen or non-invasive ventilation. Lauren Bucas, East Coast Radio Newswatch.
The health minister says there's a new committee in charge of changing people's behavior and attitudes toward COVID-19. The multi-sectoral ministerial advisory committee on social change was launched yesterday. It'll offer advice on social and cultural interventions. Taking a look at efforts to control the virus overseas, health officials in Beijing say the Chinese capital is facing an extremely severe coronavirus threat. More than 8 million people have now been infected worldwide since the pandemic first emerged in the country late last year. 27 new infections were reported in Beijing yesterday, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to 106. Meanwhile, New Zealand said the 2 new cases reported there were recent arrivals from Britain. The South Pacific nation had recently declared that it had ended community transmission of the virus. A cloudy morning in KZN with light rainfall. Durban and Richards Bay climbing to a high of 20 degrees. Maritzburg 17. A watch has been issued for heavy rain, which could lead to localized flooding over parts of the Umkhanyakude and Kimsachwaya districts from today, continuing until tomorrow. A recap of our lead story. The health ministry says hospitals may consider using a steroid drug that British researchers say reduces deaths by around a third for COVID-19 patients on ventilators. You've been with the East Coast Radio News Watch team. I'm Natara Nadesan.
To 9 a.m.
It is time now to talk about all the important things again. It's been so long, we can run the risk of sometimes forgetting how important the information is right now and what an unprecedented time we're in. Also, that it's a moving target and we need to be updated on the science of what's going on around us all the time. So it's a good thing we are friends with Professor Tulio de Oliveira from CRISP at UKZN. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Darren, and good morning to our listeners.
It's good to hear from you again. Sky asked me if I would ask you a couple of other really important questions before we get into the coronavirus questions. Number one, he wanted to know which one is better, Nando's or Afro Chicken?
Nando's, of course.
And then he said it's very important that somebody makes a decision on this, and we might as well ask a scientist, who is better, Ronaldo or Messi?
Of course, Messi, and that's quite harder for a Brazilian to say that for Argentina.
All right, Professor, we do have so much that's going on, and if I had it my way, we would check in with you every day, but we can't because you're very busy, so we'll try and get it all into our weekly catch-ups. The first thing I want to talk about is it's concerning, the growing number of infections in Gauteng, which is well connected to KZN. I mean, it's one thing to have infections in South Africa, in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape, but we are literally linked to Gauteng now with road and air as KZN. What do we need to know about these infections in Gauteng?
It is very worrying, the growing infection in Gauteng. It is worrying, especially for us. As you said, we have strong connection and relationship with Gauteng. We also have the biggest harbor where a lot of traffic come to the harbor. In the last few weeks, is a credible amount of trucks back and forward between Gauteng. So just to go to some of the cases or some of the facts, South Africa yesterday reported the biggest daily jump on new cases. And if you remember, a few weeks ago, we are talking about like low hundreds, and then we passed to talk about 1,000 cases a day. And yesterday we had 4.3 thousand new infections, which is quite worrying. And what is also quite worrying is that 1,200 of those new cases were being reported in Gauteng. So with the big jump in Gauteng, so one thing that we normally trace and we have discussed a few times in this program is the doubling rate of the infections, which in Gauteng now it is around 8 days. What it means that in around a week time, we expect to have seen double the number of infected people in Gauteng. So 1 week to double the number of infected cases. We also worry that Gauteng also has the KwaZulu-Natal on the number of deaths. Of course, we know that the number of deaths in KwaZulu-Natal was inflated in the beginning from a big hospital outbreak, but it's something that we worry because that's sometimes it is even a bigger proxy to know how the epidemic is expanding.
I know that that is an argument that's being made. I expected the public to be a little bit more shocked at the numbers in South Africa and Gauteng, but the counter argument that seems to be the argument on social media is that there was a backlog, to which my argument is normally yes, but that wouldn't account for the increase in fatalities, right?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't think that the problem is a backlog. So just to bring some other important statistical point, it's what we call the case fatality rate or the crude mortality rate. So at the moment, if we divide the number of deaths in South Africa by the number of cases, we have around 2.1%. What it means, 2.1% of people that's detected with coronavirus, die. But what we know from like over 50 countries around the world that's more advanced in the epidemic is that this virus current mortality rate is around 0.7%. So given that South Africa we at 2.1% and in reality we know the biology of the virus to be at 0.7%, what it means that probably we have 3 times more cases in South Africa. So it's very common. Of course, we cannot test and detect every single person that gets infected with coronavirus, even that we did more than 1 million tests in the country. If we just overlap this information, what we would expect is that in reality in South Africa we are underreporting, and we estimate that we have over 210,000 real infections, where so far we have detected 70,000, but we expect to be the real number of infections 3 times higher.
So to be clear, the numbers that we're seeing now are not as a result of a backlog, and the reality of it is the numbers are probably 3 times worse than they are right now. So these are the numbers that we need to be looking at. On top of this is some concerning news that the thermometers, certainly the ones that we're using in public spaces, are not very effective. What do we know about that?
Yes, this is something that also worries us. And so one thing that worries Chris, also the UKZN Coronavirus War Room and our clinicians, is this start of overuse of thermometers. Why that worry us? It's first, normally these devices are not very accurate. Why are they not very accurate? Because the best way to measure temperature in the body, it is really being measured direct, touching the forehead, in the mouth, or in the ear, or in the armpit. So you will remember in the past, your mother would put a thermometer under your arm, and then after that we come
you were lucky. You had a nice mom. My mom would stick it up my bum.
That's important what you say, because the bum, it is the best area to really read the temperature, is the most accurate one. So your mother was right.
It gets a bit awkward at work. So okay, armpit or mouth. But the difficulty with that one is that obviously people are trying to avoid touching each other. So how do we solve this problem of inaccurate distance temperature gauges, the thermometer, and not touching people?
So what we really think is that one shouldn't really use thermometers, especially in public space. And the reason for that, it is 2 main reasons. The first one, as we discussed, normally the reading of this thermometer, especially the cheap ones that I can see completely widespread in almost every shop, is not going to give an accurate reading. And normally I tell that when I enter the shop, I say, this doesn't really work. And they like, it works. And I have seen people show me that I have a temperature of 33 degrees. And
that's not possible.
And that is not possible. And I say, if I had that temperature, I would have to be in the ICU. And the guy, oh no, you are fine. We are below 38. So that's one of the point. The second point is that we have to make this our responsibility. What it means is that we should be the one scanning ourselves for kind of symptoms or temperature. And when we get any suspicious of being not feeling well or have a temperature, we should avoid going to public space. We shouldn't leave this responsibility environment of the public space, and that creates also a false sense of security. Say like, oh, I don't need to take my temperature because anyway, I'm going to go there and someone's going to take for me. And that's something that I keep repeating in our interviews, Darren, is that we have to move from thinking about me to us. How do we not only protect oneself to get infected, but how one protects the community of getting infected? And part of that, in addition of washing hands, practicing social distance, using a mask, is also make sure that in any kind of even simple symptoms, that one have a sore throat or a fever or extreme exhaustion or lack of sense of smell and taste, these are some of the early symptoms of coronavirus, that one avoid going to public space, to shoppings, and to different working environment.
Let's go overseas quickly. There's some, I suppose, alarming news coming out about infections in Beijing. What do we know about that?
Yes, so that was very big news this morning, and also not only the number of infections, but just to highlight how China and Beijing react to that. So China's capital city, Beijing, really raced to try to control a fresh coronavirus outbreak. Why is that worrying? Because it was 75 cases, all linked to a clustered outbreaks, and that's in a wholesale food market in Beijing. And they got really worried, because that's exactly how the epidemic really started and spreaded very fast in China. It was in a wet market in Wuhan. So what China responds to that? And they didn't lock the whole country. What they did, they locked like a given area around this Beijing. So if you live close to this whole food market in Beijing, now you are basically in level 5 lockdown, even more extreme than our one. You cannot leave home, food get delivered for you, and they start doing all testing in around like 100,000 people across that market. And that's the way that China responds so well. In the same in South Korea or in Singapore, it is when you found a clustered outbreak, you focus all your effort on trying to control that outbreak, and that's what currently happens. So now the whole city of Beijing cannot go to this area close to this market.
Yeah, but I suppose it's an impossibility to close down Beijing. That's 20 million people. It would be, well, I suppose that's what the rest of the world is doing right now. Mike, I suppose the question I'm asking is, people are concerned, this Beijing infection, is that part of the initial SARS-CoV-2 outbreak, or is this the second wave, the dreaded second wave that people are talking about?
So of course it should be the second wave. Not only we know that outbreak was controlled in Wuhan and China, but we also know that during the past 5 months, the virus also got introduced and reintroduced in other places. So that should be the second wave. I'm very sure that in the next few days, the Chinese scientists will sequence that virus, and we're going to probably see new mutations on the virus which are associated with a second wave. What it means, new mutations, not any mutation that make the virus more infectious or more pathogenic. It's just that over time, this virus accumulates around 2 mutations a month, and that's very important, especially for public health officials, or that's the kind of things that we do at CRISPR. Keep doing the sequencing of the DNA of the virus, because that allows you to really follow outbreaks and use the resource to try to control it.
All right, good to know. Now, can we talk a little again? We're going to jump back to South Africa. Schools went back relatively recently. Well, not all of them, but a lot of the schools and a lot of the kids at the schools have gone back. What do we know as far as infections at schools and in schools in KZN are concerned?
So probably you and your listeners will have heard that yesterday our premier of KwaZulu-Natal said that we had 14 schools that will be reopened in spite of had infections last week. So in total, we had in KwaZulu-Natal 28 schools that got some infection. We are talking about a low number of them. It is 28 teachers and 5 children between all the infected individuals. But 14 of them, they have isolated already the case. They have cleaned the schools and they are ready to reopen. Yeah. So that's the process that we expect to be happening in the next few months. Yeah. And just to go back to your previous questions about thermometers, is the solution is not to use thermometers at the school, but the main solution that is to act quick on infections, isolate individuals, and people, both children and staff and teachers, be very careful to go to school when they are not feeling well. Yeah, to try to stop these outbreaks to start again. So it's a very small number of people infected, and they are trying to act on that very quick. But the important thing it is now to try to control it, but also to avoid the next outbreaks in schools.
Yeah. So our feeling stays the same. We want our kids to go back to school, but let's be responsible and follow all of the rules. Social distancing, hand sanitization, mask wearing, and check yourself for symptoms, and back to school as usual.
Yes, we have to go back to school. Yeah, of course. For example, what may happen, what just happened in Beijing this week, yeah, as that clustered outbreak close to a market. They closed the schools within a small number of kilometers to that big outbreak. So that's the kind of thing that may also happen in the next few months, is that if an outbreak starts getting out of control in an area, that you may have to close the schools closer to the area to avoid spread further. But at the moment, it is very small number of infections, and they believe that they have isolated, and half of the schools that got infected are ready to restart again the lessons this week.
Professor, another area that is concerning me is how many healthcare workers have been infected. One would think that healthcare workers would know more than anyone else about mask wearing, hand sanitation, all of the things that are necessary to avoid infection. But yet 10% of all infections in South Africa are nurses, medical doctors, and healthcare workers. Why is this the case?
So it is why that's the case. It is for a number of reasons. One, like we know that coronavirus, especially this kind of virus, both SARS-1, SARS-2, and MERS, affect overwhelming healthcare staff. Why that? Is not because they are not using the PPE or the personal protection equipment. It's just that this virus is very easy to transmit. And sometimes we'll transmit what happened in Durban. We have 12 hospitals that got outbreaks in Durban in the last few weeks. Yeah, is that a lot of time will be in areas that you don't suspect, such as cleaning areas or tea rooms, or in the kettle, or where you eat your lunch. Yeah. So this virus spread very easily, and healthcare workers, of course, they were one of the groups that didn't stop during lockdown 5. But more important, they are the ones that get in contact with patients. Yeah, and many of them have no symptoms, and they present to the hospital not for coronavirus, for other areas, for other procedures. And one thing that we know about our medicine is that it is very hands-on. When you go to the doctor, you expect the doctor to do examination on you, open your mouth, look at your ear, touch your body. So the amount of times that they get in contact with persons, sometimes without any symptoms or no suspicions, is very high. Yeah. And of course, we really worry about the healthcare workers for 2 reasons. One, because they are really our heroes on to fight this pandemic. They are under enormous pressure, to try to help to save lives. And second is that if infections is spread in healthcare workers and in hospitals, they end up with a very high fatality ratio. Why that? Because patients also start getting infections, But a lot of time, people that are in hospital, they are vulnerable population. They are already there because they are sick. So, for example, what's happened in KwaZulu-Natal and in Durban, that was the province that shot up in the number of deaths on the beginning of this pandemic, because it entered a big hospital, and we got in that hospital 20 deaths, like within a week or 2 weeks, and that's when we almost didn't have any cases in the province. So it's really important to try to control, and also to try to really avoid going to hospitals, unless one's really need to go.
Just going back to what you said earlier, that the mortality rate is a much more accurate measure of the outbreak. Then by that argument, the Western Cape's outbreak is bigger than is being reported, or a lot bigger, because of their mortality rate, yes?
Yes, that's very, very true. So one thing that we notice is that the Western Cape mortality really increased very, very fast. And not only very fast, but if you divide the number of deaths by the number of cases, you get a kind of higher mortality rate than the rest of the country. What's also worrying, because in reality what we expect, it is what I mentioned to you before, is a mortality rate around 0.7%, and then if you go back on the envelope and try to recalculate the number of cases in the Western Cape, probably you have at least 3 to 4 times more cases than they have detected, which really means that the epidemic is getting a little bit out of control there. And that more important than ever is try to control the Western Cape outbreak, especially because the potential of that outbreak to also infect one of our most deprived provinces, that is the Eastern Cape. In the same way that Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal has this big interconnectivity, is the same between the Western Cape with the Eastern Cape. And as you notice that the Eastern Cape keep following the Western Cape in the number of infections. And that's even more worrying, because the number of healthcare workers, medical facilities, and in general, the economic power of the Western Cape, it is really very low. So we worry from the Western Cape, not only from the Western Cape, of course, we also worry about them, but also that could start infecting and spreading very poor and deprived rural areas of the Eastern Cape.
All right, so we're still very much in the thick of this. Everyone's trying to get to some semblance of normality. I get that, but we need to be completely aware of the fact that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. It is very contagious, and people are still getting sick, and people are still dying. One or two more questions, Professor, before I let you go, because I could, again, talk to you for hours about this. I saw in the news, I didn't even read the story because I knew I was going to be talking to you today. They have these medical scooters that they're rolling out. And again, I give to you the argument that the first thing that I saw on the social media was that we're going into winter, and you're asking patients who might be sick to travel in an open canopy in the freezing cold, certainly in the Western Cape and Gauteng, to a lesser degree in KZN, although this week it feels like we're in the middle of a Gauteng winter. What is the thinking behind these transporters?
So I think the thinking around these transporters, because I also noticed that most of them, they were being developed and implemented in the Eastern Cape, it is to try to provide a kind of emergency evacuation system, such as an ambulance, that can go to more areas and can access areas that are more difficult than ambulance to arrive. Of course, that would be much better to have great roads and lots of ambulance, or maybe even better to have helicopters fetching everyone. But fortunately, South Africa is still a kind of deprived country, and sometimes may have to use not the best system to evacuate patients. But I think that's very valid, because in the same way, would prefer to be somewhere that no one come to help, or to be somewhere someone arrive in a scooter in the open air? Of course, it would be better if they arrive in a very nice ambulance with warm air. But sometimes, some help is better than nothing, and that's quite important, because we also know that the time of presenting to the hospital with symptoms of coronavirus is associated with the rate of death. What it means, if you present too late to the hospital, your chance to die is much higher. And that's why it is important that people that have early symptoms to present to health facilities to make sure that they are treated, or if they need intervention, can start quite as early as possible.
You see, Professor, this is why we talk to you, because you explain it, and now I know, and now I am armed with information, and I can inform anyone who asks me any questions about these things. So I want to thank you for availing yourself, making yourself available to answer all of these questions for us. Is there anything else I need to look out for? I know, actually, I did want to talk to you. Is there truth to the rumor that one of the vaccines, I think it's the one on the west coast of America, institution has gone into stage 3 testing?
Yes, we had one vaccine that moved to what you call phase 3, and phase 3. It's what we call a double-blinded trial, where a number of people that are at risk of getting coronavirus would get the vaccine, and other number of people would get a placebo. So, but it's still early. Of course, that would be really exciting, and I really hope to be honest, having 8 vaccines that are quite advanced, that either in late phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, and would be great one to come as soon as possible. However, we think that's very unrealistic to come in the next 6 months.
And then, Professor, what's your strategy for convincing people who don't believe in vaccines that they should do the right thing and take the vaccine? Also, I suppose a double question would be, what if, say, 50% of the population decided not to take the vaccine? What are the implications of that?
Of course, that if we had an effective vaccine, and a big percentage of the population did not take the vaccine, the disease would keep spreading, and would especially spread to people that are unvaccinated. So that's something that one call a process that one call herd immunity. But you need a very high level of the herd of the population to be immune, around 80% to stop transmission of diseases. And one thing that we know, even from a very sad story, especially from measles, what is such a simple and effective vaccine, and now we have these biggest outbreaks of measles of the past 30 years are happening now at the moment, and that's from people not being vaccinated. I find very sad, because especially it's so difficult to develop a vaccine. We have like a few thousand virus species that infect humans, and we have like not even 2 hands full of vaccines, and the only ones that are effective, people still try to come with absolute nonsensical reasons to not use the vaccine.
It's sad, and I think the world is watching right now how difficult it is to come up with a vaccine. So if there is one out there that helps you with, smallpox, polio, measles, cervical cancer, then take the vaccine. It works. Science works. trusted. Professor, thank you so much for talking to us, and I'm sure we'll have 101 questions again for you next time. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Darren. I wish you and your listeners a very safe day, and please take care of yourselves, but also try to protect your community.
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate it.
Darren, Kerry and Sky, weekdays 6 to 9 a.m.
Tell you about the traffic crash with the gleam in her eye.
On FM, on the station app, and on DSTV channel 836. This is East Coast Radio. Newswatch.
The Health Minister says there's a new committee in charge of changing people's behavior and attitudes toward COVID-19. The Multi-Sectoral Ministerial Advisory Committee on Social Change was launched yesterday. It's chaired by the SA Council of Churches General Secretary Bishop Malusi Mpolwana, who will offer advice on social and cultural interventions. In a meeting online, Minister Zweli Mkhize says social change can only be achieved when the country unifies to fight the global pandemic.
It's no longer going to cover what the government has said. It's no longer going to cover anyone else but you. And therefore, this committee is going to help the guide the government how their programs should be defined so that they are able to assist us with the community response on the ground.
KZN police are investigating a case of murder after a suspected taxi boss died in hospital. SAPS spokesperson Tembeka Mbele says that the man was sitting in his vehicle at a taxi rank in Waterloo, north of Durban on Monday and was shot multiple times.
A male whose plus minus 45 years was attacked while he was seated in his car at Waterloo taxi rank. He was shot several times and he was later rushed to the hospital where he was declared dead. The motive of the killing is unknown at the moment. It's subject to investigation.
And British researchers have what they think is the first evidence of a drug which can improve COVID-19 survival rates. A cheap steroid called dexamethasone reduced death rates by a third for ventilators and by a fifth for those needing oxygen. But it doesn't appear to help patients who aren't that ill. The research was coordinated by scientists from the University of Oxford. Doctors are going to start giving the steroid to coronavirus patients. A cloudy morning in KZN with Durban and Richards Bay climbing to a high of 20 degrees, Maritzburg 17. A watch has been issued for heavy rain, which could lead to localized flooding over parts of the Umkhanyakude and Bulawayo districts from today, continuing until tomorrow. Another look at our top story. A new South African committee is taking up the fight against COVID-19. The health minister says social change is what they're after in a bid to slow the spread of coronavirus. I'm Natara Nadesim for the Newswatch team. You'll find more on these stories and information on COVID-19 at ecr.co.za. Just click on News and Traffic.
Fuck off. We're still in the fucking ad. Holy fuck. Hurry the fuck up. You just did this, did you not? Holy fuck. Come on. Yeah, we showed up 2 minutes earlier, 2 minutes behind schedule, and we're still a minute and a half late. What the fuck? Hurry the fuck up. God, I hate you fucking.
Bad weather. This is 680 News.
Here are Paul Cook and Catherine Chate.
Good morning. This is Wednesday, the 17th of June.
Here's what's making news right now.
Gotcha. Thanks to surveillance video, police arrest a 25-year-old woman in a hit-and-run Monday morning that killed a 50-year-old man on a bicycle in Markham.
Those emergency orders, first put in place in March to slow the spread of COVID-19, have been given another 2-week extension as millions prepare to enter stage 2 of reopening.
The Trudeau government faces a pair of vital votes today. Canada may find out if it will get a seat at the UN Security Council as the Liberals face a confidence test in the House of Commons.
An alleged incident of racial profiling captured on video at a West End Toronto park involving a white bylaw officer and 2 black women sparks an investigation by the city.
The Premier League returns this afternoon. Liverpool could be in a position to clinch this weekend, depending on what happens today. Sports at 15.
A drop for the cost of living. The inflation rate shows a decline of 0.4% for May, led by plunging gasoline prices year over year. Dow futures up 125, business at 26.
680 News Time 9:01.
Traffic and weather together on the ones, brought to you by TSC. Here's Eva Fragiscatos.
Well, we still have ongoing issues right now. If you're eastbound on the 401, still have delays through Highway 6 North and then from east of 6 South to approaching Guelph Line. After that, East 401 slows through Weston, both in the express and collector lanes. And if you're using that westbound 401, the collector ramps to the 410, 403, still a single lane for construction. You'll find it busy from west of Dixie and the collectors. Toronto-bound QEW over the Burlington Skyway. Great news, all problems and delays there have cleared away. If you're southbound on the 404 Don Valley Parkway, also the volume there has eased off. And westbound on the QEW at the 427, we've got the left lane closed for construction. At last check, King Road, both directions from Weston to the 400 closed off for vehicle fire cleanup. And in Brampton, Mayfield, and Kennedy, traffic lights are out. Accessorize like a diva with a beautiful freshwater pearl necklace by Imperial Pearls, available at TSC. Get it now and save over 25%. Shop tsc.ca. Now with a check on the forecast, here's Jill Taylor.
Will set at 9:02 tonight, and lots of sunshine indeed. Right now, sunny 18 at 680 News, and at Pearson, the guaranteed high today, 26. 680 News Time, 9:02.
Breaking news this morning from York Region, where police have arrested a 25-year-old woman in connection with that fatal hit and run on Monday. A 50-year-old man was riding his bicycle. He was struck and killed at Carlton Road in Old Ivy Lane near Kennedy around 8:30 Monday morning. Police say they obtained video surveillance showing the suspect vehicle with damage after the incident.
They say the woman made a false police report regarding a collision. Her vehicle was found Tuesday at an auto repair shop in Markham. The suspect is facing several charges, including failing to stop at a collision causing death, public mischief, and obstruction. The woman's been released and is set to appear in court in October.
680 News Time 9:04. Even though the number of COVID-19 cases is on the decline and the economy is slowly reopening, Premier Ford is extending emergency orders until the end of the month. 680's Mitch Brooks here live with a look at what this morning's announcement means for you and your family. Mitch.
Well, Paul, it's an announcement we've been used to hearing by now. Those emergency measures, which govern everything from crowd sizes to business reopenings, they have been up for renewal every 2 weeks by law. And so now they will be in place until the 30th of June alongside our state of emergency. That means for gathering sizes and social circles, that is all staying the same for now. And any of the dozens of orders still in place governing things like pandemic pay and childcare fees, any one of them could be called off early or extended again into July. And it comes as millions in the GTA find themselves less than 2 days away from stage 2, which means more stores open in the mall and haircuts can finally happen again. And now the CBC reports that Queen's Park is thinking about granting immunity to people and companies that could be sued related to any unwitting infections going forward. That is something the Premier has confirmed he's thinking about, meant to legally shield people who are acting in otherwise good faith. Reporting live, Mitch Burke, 680 News.
680 News Time 9:05. It's a question a lot of people have right now. Have they been exposed to COVID-19, and do they have the antibodies that could offer protection from getting sick? A Toronto-based private medical clinic will soon be offering tests at a cost. Our Mike Apple reports from the 680 Business Center.
Antibody tests are already being given in many countries, even though researchers are still not sure if having the markers for COVID-19 will offer an immunity against the virus. The Toronto Star reports Medcan, which charges an annual membership fee for services outside OHIP, will offer the tests for COVID-19 antibodies at a cost of between $200 to $400, depending on their healthcare package. A Medcan spokesperson says the results will not be used by the company, but clients who take the test will have the results reviewed by a health professional. The spokesperson with the Ontario Ministry of Health tells the Star the province is currently discussing serological testing and developing a framework and criteria to incorporate it into the larger testing strategy, which could all lead to the idea of a so-called immunity passport if the antibodies prove beneficial. At the Business Center, I'm Mike Uppel.
680 News Time 9:06. With baseball on hold, Blue Jays players are not currently here in Toronto. But as we hear from our Simon Bennett, a local landlord reportedly claims one of them owes her significant rent money.
Wow.
CBC News reporting this morning that Blue Jays player Rowdy Tellez and coach Mark Budzinski have landlords claiming they owe them rent. Linda Pinizzotto showing CBC the lease that Tellez signed with her for a two-bedroom condo in Blue Jays Way. She claims he paid first and last month's rent but hasn't paid anything since. Tellez's lawyer telling her that the agreement was based on him playing for the Blue Jays this year, which hasn't happened yet due to the shutdown. Pinizzotto says rent of the property is over $4,000 a month. She has now hired a lawyer to help recoup the losses. Meanwhile, her husband, Derek Thomas, agreed to rent out his Wellington Street West condo to Budzinski, the first base coach. Thomas says he paid for March and April, but then his paralegal asked for the money back. Neither Tellez, Budzinski, or the Jays organization have commented. I'm Simon Bennett.
680 News Time 9:07. The Trudeau Liberals are preparing for two major votes today, which could lead to victory for the government or potential embarrassment. From Ottawa, 680's Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
Ballots will be cast at the United Nations today after years of campaigning for Canada to nab one of two rotating seats on the Security Council. We're up against Ireland and Norway in a tight race, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has placed a lot of political weight behind this campaign, so a loss could be seen as a hit to our credibility on the world stage. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has called this a vanity project and criticizes the Liberals for their foreign decisions to secure votes.
What's the point of having a seat at the table if you have to sell out Canadian principles?
Meanwhile, in the House of Commons, the minority Liberals face a confidence vote over $87 billion in program spending. By extending the emergency response benefit, they've likely secured the support of the NDP, which means they'll probably survive and the country will avoid a COVID-19 election. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
680 News Time 9:08. A city bylaw officer is being accused of racial profiling in a West End park. 680's Jamie Pulper has the story and reaction.
The incident captured on cell phone video at Centennial Park in Etobicoke. A white bylaw officer confronting two black women, accusing them of trespassing. They alleged they were singled out and threatened.
When two black women, then you have the audacity to say, because we're trespassing, you could shoot us? Are you crazy?
At the end, I said no such thing.
Are you serious?
The video posted at 680news.com. The women say they were in the park for a workout. The gate was open with several people also in the park. But when they tried to leave, the gate was closed, and they were the only ones asked for ID, not the white teenagers who were also leaving at the same time. Mayor John Tory says the city is investigating, tweeting that no bylaw officer should ever threaten or even suggest violence, calling the allegations extremely disturbing and that anti-black racism will not be tolerated. I'm Jamie Pulfer.
680 News Time 9:09. A wheel came off a tractor trailer last night on the 401 in Scarborough, injuring several people and damaging vehicles. 680's Carl Hansky is near the westbound 401 at McCowan.
It's all cleared away now, but around 11 last night, a tractor trailer heading east on the 401 by McCowan Road here lost the wheel, which bounced into the westbound express lanes. OPP Sergeant Kerry Schmidt says an oncoming vehicle then struck the wheel,
causing a pretty significant collision when you have a wheel that weigh a couple hundred pounds sitting on the highway.
4 other vehicles then collided as a result. Jay can especially relate. He too hit a flying tire once and lived to tell the tale.
He had no time to react. I was lucky.
So were these people. 4 were injured, 2 17-year-old girls with serious injuries, but no one died. The truck was later located, the truck driver charged with wheel separation. At the 401 on McCowan Road, I'm Carl Hansky.
680 News Time 9:10.
I might have been recording it. I remember yelling something. I didn't know wheel separation inside.
Canadians are starting to open their doors again. Nissan is ready with amazing deals. Finance 2020 Nissan Rogue for 2019 cash card kicks from as low.
Okay, we're gonna cheat. We need that one. Okay. it's not working. What the fuck? Jesus Christ. 13 o'clock. Okay. Open incognito. Why do you say open incognito? Open in incognito tab. Why do you say open incognito? It's less words. Same thing. 5, 6, 7, 8 or something. Ooh, that's fast. 1, 2, 3. I know it wasn't exactly 33 seconds. I don't care. Come on, China, you can do it. The U.S. Army built this for you and the Russians and the Cubans. The fuck's going on? Okay, maybe we just fuck with it. It should be 30 seconds. That's not. I might all be fucking listening to the day's podcast, downloading them all. I don't know what to do. Then one of these fucking countries is all in one time zone. I can't remember if it's China or Russia. Studio Plus. No. Okay, wait. Hold on. There's no one at all. Down. I'm a vegetarian. No, I'm not. Don't ever. That was a lie. I was reading words off a screen. Coronavirus, which is really going on. No, let's ignore that because that's obviously the bait, right? Like, oh, listen to this, and there's nothing there. Subscribe. No data. Well, this is bad. I mean, no data. That's not good. Well, no, I'm at a loss. Now these ones are blank. Okay, what the fuck is going on? I'm gonna close this just in case they're tracking that with cookies or something. I don't think they care about IP addresses because it's China. They know how easy that is to deal with. Why waste the time tracking that if we're outside the country? But I think the cookies thing might be an issue. No. Reset. Start. Whoa, that was fast. No, it's not. Why is it that bar is not connected to shit? Wow, this is not. I already told us everything. Anyway. I was just looking at that website. If it's under 60 seconds, it's quite frankly not that bad. It's not a commercial thing. This is all just funded out of the government. And they serve the whole world. Just they don't censor it to anybody. Probably attacked a lot. This is not working. Not good. Oh, shit. Someone said the other. Damn it. Oh, this is. I wasn't supposed to touch the fucking thing at all. Oh, shit. Come on. You can do it, internet. Oh, Jesus.
Et si vous étiez...
Okay. A minute 48, really? A minute 50, whatever. That's insane. podcast. Pictures and everything. Roundtable, no, Beijing hour, because that's been out there for hours, and I want to hear what happened this morning. Their morning. This morning. Yesterday. This morning. There's a podcast and advertisement. Subscribe to find out. Apple, Spotify, Google. I don't know what the systems are. iHeart, Stitcher. I don't know what the systems are. June 17. No. It says Beijing raises COVID-19 emergency response level. I thought we knew that. China urges India to stop provocative actions following severe border clash. I think we know this. Trump signs order on police reform. South Korea expresses regret over North's explosion of liaison office. It's interesting to use that word. Former insurance regulator chief sentenced for taking. I thought we knew all this. That says it's today. It's, what the fuck? So this is 56 minutes and change. Make it good. No static, please.
Examining the events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now, here's your host,
Shane Bigham with you on this Wednesday, June 17th, 2020. You're listening to the Beijing Hour, live from the Chinese capital. On today's program, Beijing's upgraded its emergency response level as it deals with a growing cluster of new COVID-19 cases.
According to the leading group for COVID-19 prevention and control in Beijing, we, after applying for approval in line with procedure, decided to raise the emergency response in Beijing from the 3rd level to the 2nd level, starting from this moment on June the 16th.
China's urging India to stop its aggression at the border following a violent confrontation. China seeing a boom in the self-driving vehicle market. In business, a former chairman of the China Insurance Regulatory Commission has been sent to prison. In sports, 8 straight titles for Bayern Munich. In entertainment, Jimmy Kimmel will host the Emmys. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Beijing Hour. 60 minutes of comprehensive news. Your window on China and the world.
Welcome back now to today's top stories. Beijing's upgraded its emergency response to COVID-19 from level 3 to level 2 amid a cluster of newly reported cases in the city. Chen Bei with the municipal government says the outbreak in the city has become severe as the city's been reporting double-digit growth of new cases on a daily basis.
According to the leading group for COVID-19 prevention and control in Beijing, we, after applying for approval in line with procedure, decided to raise the emergency response in Beijing from the 3rd level to the 2nd level, starting from this moment on June the 16th.
Prevention measures will be enforced in markets, restaurants, and canteens, with employees required to wear masks and gloves. Certain team sports will halt, while cultural venues will remain closed. The city's confirmed over 100 domestically transmitted cases since June 11th, most of which have been linked to the Xinfadi wholesale market. The market's been shut down, with imported seafood products removed since the virus was said to have been found on a cutting board used for processing imported salmon. 11 nearby residential communities have been placed on lockdown, and mass nucleic acid testing is also being carried out. Beijing will increase its control over travelers entering and exiting the city after its COVID-19 emergency response was upgraded. Chen Bei is the Deputy Secretary General of the Beijing Municipal Government.
全部集中观察。
People entering Beijing from abroad will have to be quarantined and take a nucleic acid test. Those living in medium or high-risk areas, as well as those who have recently visited Xinfadi wholesale market, are prohibited from leaving Beijing.
She adds that those who need to leave the city must have negative results from a nucleic acid test taken within 7 days. Interprovincial group tours will also be suspended. Chen also says that classes will be moved online for primary and middle school students, and college students will stop going back to school. She adds that businesses don't need to be shut down, and that remote or off-peak working is encouraged. The recent cluster outbreak has affected 9 districts and 28 neighborhoods in Beijing. 27 of the neighborhoods have been classified as medium risk zones, and 1 as high risk. The Health Commission of Wuhan says the city, once hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, has cleared all of its asymptomatic cases. This comes after the last 3 asymptomatic cases in the city were released for medical observation after negative nucleic acid tests. There are also no more contacts under observation. Wuhan reported 300 asymptomatic infections and over 1,100 close contacts during a citywide nucleic acid testing drive. Its health commission says none of those carriers were found to have infected others. The city has no existing confirmed or suspected COVID-19 cases as of Monday. The Chinese presidents discussed ways to boost cooperation in the fight against COVID-19 during separate talks with his counterparts from Tajikistan and Ecuador over the phone. Xi Jinping calls on China and Tajikistan to coordinate efforts to contain the epidemic, promote bilateral trade, and ensure the implementation of key projects in the Belt and Road Initiative. In the meantime, he says China will do its best to provide necessary assistance and explore cooperation with Ecuador in areas such as vaccine and drug research and production. The Chinese president will host a summit on the joint efforts of China and Africa to fight COVID-19. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says Xi Jinping will deliver a speech at the meeting that's to be held later on today through video link. Leaders of African countries, as well as the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Director General of the World Health Organization, will attend the meeting.
It's just a meeting. We don't get to watch.
Many African countries hit hard by the novel coronavirus outbreak are speaking highly of the anti-pandemic assistance from China. The country so far provided medical aid and supplies to over 50 African countries, as well as the African Union, and also dispatched multiple medical teams to help fight against COVID-19. Leaders such as Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa have thanked China for that support.
On behalf of the government and people of Zimbabwe, and indeed on my own behalf, I express my gratitude to His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, for the assistance that he continues to give our country, Zimbabwe. This is a clear demonstration of the comprehensive strategic partnership relationship between the 2 countries, Zimbabwe and the People's Republic of China.
Leaders from Equatorial Guinea, South Africa, and others have also praised China's anti-pandemic support. They say their capability to respond to COVID-19 has been strengthened thanks to the experience in pandemic prevention and control shared by Chinese medical workers. Ikenna Amiwu is the executive director of the Afro-China Media Center based in Nigeria, and he says China's assistance shows that it values human lives.
I commend China for extending its goodwill to Africa. It sent over 148 medical officials and experts to 11 African countries, not to talk of the medical supplies from the government, from individuals. China did something commendable, and I really commend the country for such efforts.
So far, the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases on the continent has exceeded 250,000, with over 6,700 deaths. The World Health Organization's regional director for the Americas is warning that the region's fast approaching 4 million COVID-19 cases in the pandemic continues to accelerate. Carissa Etienne made the remarks in a virtual briefing from the Washington-based Pan American Health Organization.
The United States accounts for 54% of all cases in the Americas. Brazil has 23% of all cases and 21% of all deaths in our region. And we are not seeing transmission slowing down. That is the cases in almost all countries in Latin America and a few in the Caribbean are rising.
There were over 3.8 million COVID-19 cases and more than 200,000 deaths reported in the Americas as of Monday. Etienne adds that they also remain concerned about Haiti and the Dominican Republic, both of which continue to report a rise in new cases. Researchers in Japan say COVID-19 is responsible for even more job losses than the 2008 global financial crisis. Unemployment had already risen to a one-year high in March, and government officials say the situation's become more severe in the following months. For those who've lost their jobs, finding a new one is hard work. Grace Lee has more from Tokyo.
It's been weeks since Japan lifted its state of emergency. Little by little, Tokyo's streets are coming back to life, and the morning commute is starting to get busy again. But COVID-19 has already left its mark on Japan's job market, with economists from a university research institute saying it may. Yamada is one of them.
The rent is very high in Tokyo. So, every month my saving is getting lower and lower, and I'm a little bit worried.
She was supposed to start a new job in April at a music company.
They asked me to wait for a few weeks. So I waited a few weeks, but the situation didn't change. So they said, okay, I'm sorry, this contract is canceled.
However, Yamada was able to get compensated for the time she was asked to wait, at least in part. According to Japan's labor laws, employers are supposed to pay their workers at least 60% of their wages during a leave of absence, if it was requested from the employer's side. Because Japan's state of emergency has had no hard policies on closing businesses, it's meant employers were still on the hook for their workers' pay. But some businesses have simply refused to pay.
I was supposed to start on May 1st. Because of Corona, it was pushed down to maybe after Golden Week.
Hiroshi Kikushima had found a new job as a language teacher, but when the pandemic hit, the company told him to stay at home and wait without compensation.
So I talked to them, I was like, there's this article number 26 for the labor law. They're supposed to cover at least 60% of our would-be salaries, so we can still pay our bills and food and stuff. And they told me, no, they're not going to pay for those.
Japan's general union says cases like Kikushima's have been common, with companies shirking the blame on the pandemic. The union's general secretary, Dennis Tesselat.
We discussed lots with the Labor Bureau here in Osaka, and even then, their position was very clear. No, this is still voluntary. The government has not locked down anybody. The government cannot close a business. So any loss of business or any, that you close your company, well, that's up to you.
Many of those workers have yet to be compensated. Both Kikushima and Yamada are actively looking for jobs. But with 3 million other people set to be out of work because of COVID-19, competition is fierce, and the pandemic isn't quite over yet. For the Beijing Hour, I'm Grace Lee in Tokyo.
For more on COVID-19, subscribe to our podcast, Coronavirus, What's Really Going On, which brings you everything you need to know about the novel coronavirus. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up, China's urging India to stop its aggression at the border following a violent clash this week.
The Beijing Hour. The Beijing Hour brings you an hour of comprehensive news and information from both China and the rest of the world. A mix of news, sports, and entertainment. In-depth analysis of the day's big stories, as well as the most comprehensive business of the day. The Beijing Hour. Your very own window to China and the rest of the world.
A Beijing Hour is only 56 minutes.
Past the hour. China's urging India to stop its aggression at the shared border between the two countries following a physical clash in the Galvan Valley region on Monday. 3 Indian servicemen were reportedly killed in the violent face-off, but China's not given the exact number of casualties. The incident came less than 10 days after the two sides reached a consensus on easing the situation in the border area at a commander-level meeting. Chinese Foreign Ministry is blaming Indian forces for violating the consensus, illegally crossing the border and attacking Chinese soldiers. It demands the Indian side restrain its frontline troops, refrain from crossing the border, and not take unilateral action that may complicate the situation. South Korea has expressed deep regret over the North's demolition of a joint liaison office. North Korea blew up the office in the border town of Kaesong on Tuesday, the latest step in the protests over defectors in the South sending anti-Pyongyang propaganda leaflets. South Korean Vice Unification Minister Soo Ho says the demolition should never have happened.
North Korea's unilateral demolition of South and North Korea joint liaison office today was unprecedented in inter-Korean relations and a nonsensical act that should not have happened. We express deep regret and strongly protest against it.
The office was opened in September of 2018 following summit talks between the leaders on both sides. Its destruction is deemed a major setback to efforts to achieve cooperation. In the meantime, China has vowed to remain committed to sustained peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says China continues to support the reconciliation of the two nations. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order that says he'll reform police practices while maintaining law and order in the country. The order signed on Tuesday follows weeks of protests against police brutality over the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. It provides for the adoption of the latest standards of use of force and improved information sharing to avoid hiring officers with poor records. Trump's proposal offers federal funds to police departments to get independent certification from outside bodies.
Chokeholds will be banned, except if an officer's life is at risk. And I will say we've dealt with all of the various departments, and everybody said it's time. We have to do it.
Before signing the order, Trump met with the families of some of the victims of police brutality and expressed sympathy to the families and promised them he will fight for justice. He also defended the police, though, calling for law and order in the country and issuing a threat of penalties for looters. Trump reiterated his opposition to calls to defund the police by reimagining police departments. The order is seen as a policy response to rising concerns about racial injustice ahead of the November 3rd election. Trump will be seeking re-election for his second term in office. NATO is seeking details on U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to cut U.S. troops in Germany. Trump on Monday confirmed reports of a cut of 9,500 troops in what may be the first time the U.S. president carries through on threats to reduce support in Europe. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says that he's spoken to Trump and other U.S. officials, as well as the German defense minister, on the issue.
Exactly how and when this decision will be implemented is not yet decided, and therefore I think it is important that we now have a dialogue within NATO on this issue. It's a bilateral arrangement between the US and Germany, but of course it matters for the whole alliance.
Trump's decision comes as he has previously criticized Germany for not spending more on defense, causing tensions with Chancellor Angela Merkel. The U.S. is expected to brief its NATO allies on the decision at the NATO defense ministers meeting that's coming up today and tomorrow. Armed police have been sent into a suburb of Dijon, eastern France, to deal with gang violence. Rival gangs have been involved in street violence for 4 nights following an alleged attack on a Chechen teenager. Deputy Interior Minister Laurent Nunez has traveled to Dijon and denounced the violence.
Ici, en France, la justice, elle est rendue par l'État.
Here in France, it's the state that renders justice. We are in a state of law. No one can implement justice by himself. It's the state that renders justice. It's important to remember this.
Around 100 armed Chechen youths from across France reportedly descended on the town of Grazil to avenge the attack on the Chechen team. The mayor of